Hello out there. It's good to be back. If you are with us on chat today on one of our social channels, please feel free to let me know that you can hear me. We're going to be diving in a moment to a session on the 5 domains of embodiment, session number 3. All right, I think we are good to go. I'm going to go ahead and dive in. All right, so hi there. I'm Leanne Mallory. I'm the CEO of Guts and Grace Leadership. And I am an embodied leadership coach and executive coach for the secretly spiritual, highly disruptive female leader and innovator. And what this means to be an embodied leadership coach is that I have deeply studied and I continue to practice the art of authentic leadership, how we develop our presence, our power, and our impact by bringing our whole selves to the table. And also, I'm in a deep study of the art and practice of being human. How do we live in alignment with our values? How do we build lasting and coherent relationships? And how do we honor and take care of our bodies so that we can keep doing the big work we are born to do without burning out? So this is a session that is going to be a continuation of the last couple of days of lives we've been doing on the 5 domains of embodied leadership. What is this thing called embodied leadership and what does it refer to? So we will be diving in a moment to our next couple of domains. But before we do, as we've been doing on this series, I want to invite you to take a moment and be with your body and your embodiment so that we're really walking our talk as we also are in a process of learning inside of this work. So I invite you to, wherever you're at, whatever you're coming from, even if you're driving somewhere or walking somewhere, to take a moment. You can keep your eyes open if you're doing something else right now, but take a moment and bring your awareness to the sensations in your body. If you are just sitting at home on a chair, you're welcome to take time and close your eyes if that's helpful. You can keep them open. And go ahead and take a couple of deeper breaths. And as you breathe, let yourself feel. How do I know that I'm alive? I can feel something. How do I know that I'm present? I can feel something. Maybe it's as simple as your feet on the ground or your butt on the chair. And do for a moment here a little body scan. So go ahead and start at the top of your head. See if you can sense literally the very top of your head. And let your attention scan down from the top of your head through kind of your eye, I would say your eye band area, the line around and behind your eyes. And just notice, do you notice any pain, any tightness, any pleasure, joy, feeling, positive sensation, aliveness, a sense of movement through that area, stillness or a stuckness? Bring your awareness down into your jaw and this area behind your jaw and the front of your jaw, sides of your jaw. Coming down into your neck and your throat. And if you notice a place of tension, you're welcome to relax it if you can, or just notice. Bringing your awareness down into your shoulder girdle, very front of your collarbone, back of your shoulders, Down into your chest, the front of your heart, the back of your heart, a little bit lower below your rib cage and the solar plexus area, again, front and back, just noticing. Coming down into your belly, noticing, sensing your hips, a place where your legs come into your hips, noticing your thighs, your knees, the area around your calves and shins, and down into your ankles and your feet. And take one more deeper breath. As you breathe in, let your lungs expand your rib cage, and exhale. Part of why we do this is because it's impossible to think and feel at the same time, meaning to be somewhere else, like I'm lost in my thoughts, I'm making stuff up, I'm planning, and sensing, being in relationship with the sensations in my body at once. We have to toggle between those things. And so when we captivate our energy or our attention with our sensations, it actually brings us into present time, rather than the past or the future or the planning or all the other things. So getting in relationship with the sensations of your body is a good way to get present, get here, and get now. All right, so we are here for day 3 of a series on the domains of embodied leadership. And I'll just give a little background. So this is the third of our series. We've been talking about this word embodiment and what it means. This word has started to get a little bit trendy, kind of like mindfulness did a number of years back. Maybe we hadn't been talking about or doing embodiment or somatics in the workplace, and now it's becoming more of a thing. But what does it really mean? What does embodiment really mean? And what does it add to this conversation about mindfulness? And also, what does it add to our conversation about our leadership? So over the next couple of days, I'm going to offer a taste of this world by introducing you to one of the 5 domains of embodied leadership. And I hold those as, I use the acronym MEME, M-E-M-2-E, movement, emotions, mindset, mission, and energy, to talk about the whole and the totality of what makes up our embodiment, or our living body and our living being in its wholeness, so that you can start exploring your relationship with these. Also, next week, I'm going to be offering a new masterclass called Your Body, Your Partner, the only proven path to greater presence, purpose, and power without burning out, which you can register for post this event if you would like to go deeper. We'll make sure there's a URL in the show notes. And also, both of these offers are part of our next Guts and Grace year-long cohort program launch, which is a coaching and embodiment training program for, I like to say, disruptive women leaders, but really any women leader who wants to get a little bit less kind of embodied in their old patriarchal program and a little more embodied in their whole self, their real self, their most potent and powerful version of their leadership. So if that is of interest, also really invite you to consider signing up for a coaching discovery call to find out more about how this particular unique type of coaching and body of work could be helpful to you. But for now, we're going to go ahead and dive in a little more deeply on what is embodiment and what are the domains of it, and how can I kind of make sense of them or understand them in my own leadership and life. So in the first couple of sessions, I covered the first 2 domains: movement, meaning your body posture, your shape, the way that you move through the world, the type of kind of movement signatures or patterns that you find yourself in. So one part of our embodiment. And then on our last session, I talked about emotions. This is more the chemical and feeling aspect of our embodiment. And I shared some examples of women leaders who have leveraged their embodied self-awareness to transform their leadership. Today, I'm actually going to spend some time on the 3rd domain of embodied leadership. As a reminder, the domains: movement, emotions, mindset, mission, and energy. And I'll be working with the middle 2 M's today, so mindset and mission. What does that mean? We will go there in a moment. Why we're doing this is because having a basic knowledge of these domains and really learning to become aware of them from the inside out matters when you start to understand your embodiment, you can work with it instead of working against it, or instead of it working against you. So we're going to focus today on this kind of middle domain of mindset and mission. And mindset really is the story and thought part of our embodiment. And that sounds kind of funny, like if we're talking about embodiment, our thoughts included. But since embodiment really is like the living being, our entire self and our wholeness, certainly our thoughts are part of that. And they're intricately woven, of course, with both our emotions, which we've already talked about, and the way we carry ourselves through the world. And then there's a close cousin, the second M, which I call mission. And that's really like the directionality, or kind of the inherent, maybe unconscious, but well practiced goal that your embodiment points you toward, for better or for worse, and often both. So let's start with a bit of a study on mindset and like, what is this part of our embodiment? Let's talk about this for a moment here. Mindset is used a lot, more and more now in leadership training and the corporate space. It can mean a lot of things. The way I'm using it here is a big umbrella that has to do with anything that is kind of the thoughts, the stories, the narratives, the mental part of our embodiment. And here we're not talking about momentary, fleeting thoughts, but more like ingrained, repetitive, ongoing, habitual patterns of thinking, patterns of doing the mind work that we do, patterns of telling stories that are fairly coherent with the rest of our embodiment, the rest of how we present to ourselves and to the world, and how our systems work. So mindset, in this way of using it as a kind of an aspect of our embodiment, includes a number of different things. It includes things like your typical frame of mind, or the way you're kind of tinge sort of your mentality about things. So that could be like, I'm generally optimistic about things, or I'm generally pessimistic about things, or a certain kind of flavor of how my thinking tends to go. It also includes the narratives or stories that you tell yourself about yourself. I'm like X. So it could be things like self-critique, or certain boxes that you put yourself in, or a kind of pedestal that you tend to put yourself on. I can do anything. I'm the kind of person who, I'm really bad at X, Y, Z. I don't like these kinds of things. All of the things that are part of the belief system about you that have gotten shaped and built over time through your experiences, and through your choices and decisions, and through the results that you've gotten from your choices and decisions. So there's all kinds of stories that we tell ourselves, and often they're fairly coherent with how we move through the world, or what our typical emotions tend to be. It also includes the other side of the coin. So the narratives or stories you tell yourself about the world and or other people, usually and other people. This could be, it's kind of like, it's like this out there, or other people are always like X or like Y. This always happens to me because the world is like X. This is also part of our embodiment. It dictates, it narrates really how we relate to the world around us, and what we allow as possible and not possible because it's like X. There can also be kind of like mottos in here. A thing that you often heard from your parents growing up, or you heard in your community growing up, that has just kind of become the taken as truth part of you and how you see the world. So that might be another bucket that we can consider when we look at the embodiment and our mindset and our embodiment. It also includes frequent obsessive thought patterns. I worry a lot in this particular way. I'm always trying to figure things out. Planning, making sure I have plan A, plan B, plan C. Obsessive thought pattern, like I did it wrong again, it wasn't good enough this time. The things that we tend to think, and these ones, any one of these things that I've mentioned may have language, like it actually has a phrase or particular words that you can hear in your head, or you actually hear yourself say out loud. Or sometimes they're more kind of amorphous, if you will, just like, this sort of sense of always wondering if the next shoe is going to drop, but I'm not like thinking a particular sentence about it. I'm just like sort of looking around for it, right? These can be part of our thought forms and our kind of mindset embodiment narrative. It can also be, a particular phrase. You have to work hard to get things done, for example. This is, and it sits in a few different categories for me, but it's like, the things that we heard people say that have, again, become just a part of who we are, or become a part of how we choose or how we live, or what shapes us. Women should be young women, or girls should be seen and not heard, for example, might fit into this category, right? And if you imagine that forward, it's like there's a phrase. It creates a certain set of thoughts about what I can and can't do, should and shouldn't do, and it probably has impacted how I feel at different moments, and also perhaps the shaping. So we go back to bucket number one, domain number one, around our movement and our posture and our presence. It's like women should be seen and not heard, for example, or women should be seen and not heard. I'm going to change the narrative about that, right? Sometimes our shaping is against a certain phrase or toward a certain phrase when it comes to the physicality of it, or even how we act. So this is part of the domain. And then, a lot of what I just mentioned is kind of in the individual nature, but then there's the broader kind of rings of who we hang out with, and what society or what culture we're a part of, or what groups that we're a part of, and the narratives that they have about how people should be, can or can't be, how the world is in relation to us, these kinds of things. So it might have threads in our culture, might have threads in a particular social group or social location that we're a part of. And these are often layers that either are a match for or similar to what the kind of individual programming is, and or it might be in contradiction to. So I should be this way, but my group tends to be that way, for example. I grew up in a working class community, and there's sort of this ethos, mindset, belief, way of thinking that it's like we can never get ahead. It's a certain kind of story. We had certainly evidence about that in terms of what would happen and not happen, or what we get access to in that community. And then also it dictated certain things, like in my own physical presence and the way I move through the world. What I discovered at one point along my journey is that I wouldn't reach for things, literally extending my presence, or reaching out, or extending my energy into the world. I would kind of keep it close in, because it doesn't matter if you try. Right. I wasn't necessarily thinking that consciously, but that's kind of how these things can start to fit together. The mood in that is a little bit resigned, not very excited about things, for example. In my version of it, right? Yours may be very different, and you may have a similar story. Also, this can be, again, like I said, our culture, and some of us have embodied more than one culture. So maybe we're actually have this set of narratives and that set of narratives, or this set of mindsets and that set of mindsets, based on having this culture, and then maybe growing up in a different location. Part of my early work before I was a coach and a trainer, I was a researcher, and I was studying at the time Chinese American biculturalism with a couple who were students of Carol Dweck, who wrote our favorite book on mindset. And they were looking at how we switch between different cultures we've embodied based on maybe the context that we're in. So this can all get very complicated. But for example, in that research, they would see that, like a Chinese cultural mentality would tend to be more collectivist, more oriented toward the other, whereas an American cultural mentality and mindset was more individualist, more oriented toward myself. Lots of nuances, broad brush, sweeping brush there. But they were looking at, well, how does one, if one has both of those trainings, how does one actually embody that? Another version of these kinds of aspects of our mindset embodiment would be, do we see the world as fixed or malleable? Again, coming from some of Carol Dweck's early and deep research. So things can change, or things are not going to change, and therefore then I should be this way, do this way, think this way. So all of these things are part of your embodiment. It's like we can't tease it all apart, right? If we go in the deepest conversation about embodiment, we're really talking about all these aspects of ourselves versus just kind of one puzzle piece. And you start to see that they become fairly coherent. And as you start to notice that, you find that it is possible to unravel, or to understand, or to get into and kind of leverage, work with, learn from one's embodiment from any of these different doorways. If I have the mindset or the kind of story and narrative that young women should be seen and not heard, and I have the shaping of pull in, be smaller, don't take up as much space, I can begin to work with that aspect of myself from either of those two directions or both, right? Sometimes it's useful to work with both. There's one more thing I want to share, and this is the M squared. So there's another thread that is similar to everything I just described, but it actually kind of has its own weightiness to it. So I like to talk about it separately. And this is the M that I call mission. I think this is the domain of embodiment that often people either miss or loop in with other domains. And here's what it means, that our embodiment also tends to have a unique kind of directionality to it. This might be a way where we're trained, or our attention tends to run, like I tend to focus on certain kinds of things and not others, and or a certain goal that my embodiment is always trying to achieve, because that's the right goal for one like me to go toward, whether I'm aware of it or not. So it's kind of like a narrative, like it's kind of part of my mindset, but it also may not be conscious, and it also tends to guide us a bit like a compass. So I'll give you a couple of examples. No matter what, don't upset anyone or ever be a burden on anyone you care about. Certainly that's a thought, right? It's a mindset, but it also really tells me what I can and can't do, where I should and shouldn't play, how I should show up and not show up. It kind of gives a certain directionality and leaves a lot of things on the table and a lot of other things not on the table. Often this will go, this kind of a, this kind of a mission, a kind of embodied mission may go with someone who would identify themselves as conflict avoidant or people pleasing, for example. It's like, don't upset the boat. And then everything I'm doing is kind of oriented around not having that kind of impact. Or, for example, I must get the A, be perfect, get to the next rung on the ladder. My directionality, my mission is about getting to the next place, right? Getting ahead in some way, or achieving something. Or something more like the opposite. I can achieve anything I want, or people like me can't, and I should never try, a little bit in the earlier example. So it does overlap with the mindset part of our embodiment, but it has its own kind of, again, weightiness to it. Another one, screw the establishment. Whatever word you might want to use there. Maybe a stronger word than that. It's like, yeah, never play with a big system, right? Never orient in that way, and therefore I can and can't, do and don't, should and shouldn't, go in this direction, not that direction, and so forth. So this is the domain of the mind when it comes to our embodiment. And really, like, I hold this as a coherent part of the puzzle of what makes up the unique embodied kind of being that we are. The reason to be tracking this in the context of embodiment is because it is tied very closely to our emotions, the ways that we're shaped, the choices we make, the behaviors we can or can't be in. And so in a coherent study of embodiment, it's useful to also examine, to take a look at this. So as we've done in the last couple of days, I'm going to close by giving you a little bit of homework, a little self-study on this topic. And specifically, I want to invite today that your homework is to bring your awareness to the mindset, these different aspects of it that I spoke about today, the stories, the narratives, the mottos, the can and can't, should and shouldn't, and also the mission or the ingrained direction that your programming tends to take you toward. So it could be that you're bringing awareness to frequent thoughts, or a kind of language, or a type of choice you always make, or a way that you weigh things that is actually really prevalent in you or for you. Or even it could be as part of this that you consider things that you find yourself thinking or doing that actually you learned from somewhere before yourself, either from, again, parents, family system, the people who are around you, or even broader culture or social groups that you've been a part of. And what are the repetitive, ongoing, typical thought forms, narrative stories that are a part of that. And if you've done a lot of that work before, I really also invite you to then keep tying it back to what we've done in the last two sessions. So yes, I think this thought all the time and I'm aware of that. How is that connected to the moods and emotions I allow myself? How does that actually um, cohere with the way that I move through the world in my physical body, posture, pacing, do's and don'ts from a taking up space or a type of movement perspective? So you're not just tracking the thoughts, if that's something you're really familiar with, but you're also tracking the system, how the system seems to work for you. All right. I hope this was helpful, interesting, and maybe gives you a few more places to look around the comprehensive package that is your unique embodiment. For sure, once again, if you would like to go deeper, please feel free to join us for our new masterclass next week, Your Body, Your Partner, the only proven path to greater presence, purpose, and power without burnout. I would love to share a little more with you about how to actually work with these things, how they can be translated to leadership practices. So I hope to see you there. And if you have any interest in learning more about our Guts and Grace Women's Leadership Coaching Program, once again, you can check us out online. You can check out our Guts and Grace website, gutsandgrace.com/coaching-approach, or book a discovery call to have a chat with myself or our team at gutsandgrace.com/apply. Thank you very much for being here, and we'll see you tomorrow for the final session in our teaching series on the 5 domains of embodiment. Hope to see you very soon.